Day 685 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is a super quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 365,000 military personnel losses there, which represents an additional 820 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 5 tanks, 9 APVs, and 6 artillery. Then we'll head across into the map today, into Russia, as explosions rattled the city of Nizhny Tagil in the Urals, causing a significant disruption at a railway track near an oil depot. So in this case, Russian media and local Telegram channels reported that a train car located close to the depot sustained considerable damage due to an explosive device. This device reportedly attached to the train with a magnet, which had led to the destruction of an oil car at the site. And then, adding to the tension, authorities discovered another explosive device in the vicinity, highlighting the severity of the situation and the potential for further damage. As such, Russia really does continue to deal with the enemy from within, as they're dealing with likely partisan activity once again. But things aren't just heating up in Russia, they're cooling down as well. For instance, more people in Moscow are complaining about unheated apartments, but also some districts look like luxurious hot springs in Moscow, but instead it was the fallout from bursting hot water pipes. Also, residents in Podolsk in Moscow gathered at the town's central square to demand the restoration of heating as soon as possible and punish those responsible for the outage. With one resident saying, quote, "The police arrived quickly to disrupt us. I wish they'd brought back the heating as fast as they dispatched the cops." But then also, a train in St. Petersburg lost heating, making for some inside frosted carriages. And it might look like all bad news for Russia, but there is good news. Because the Podolsk residents, for example, have now been advised that they no longer have to pay for their heating bill until things get fixed. Which actually shouldn't be a news story at all, it should be an obvious set of circumstances. But in reality, regional Muscovites have had winter heating outages for years and still had to pay for the heat that they didn't get. I guess everyone can't have it all. Then moving across the map, so hundreds of miles from the front lines, it was noted that a cruise missile had been dropped in Russia, this time in Volgograd, 450 kilometers from the front lines. And I'm actually also reminded of a failing Kinzhal missile, failing in the same oblast about 6 months ago. Then we quickly head to the Russian oblasts of Bryansk and Belgorod, which reported the activation of their air defenses over the region overnight, with the Bryansk governor stating it was from drone incursions, but little more is known apart from that. Then into the Ukrainian map, and since we're around here anyway, so it should be noted for the Russian, or the Ukrainian northern oblasts of Sumy and Chernihiv, Russia maintains a force of about 19,000 troops along the borders to those Ukrainian oblasts, which is according to the spokesperson for Ukraine's northern forces. The spokesperson also stated that this is pretty much a token force that has remained relatively unchanged in quite some time, and as such there is no perceived land-based incursion from the north anytime soon. Then moving across to the Donbass region today, as there was yet another emergency release of a Russian Fab 250 aerial glide kit munition, which is really starting to put on display some of the failure rates of these things. And do note, nobody was injured, but some houses were evacuated. Then somewhere in the east, and really for some big news today, so it was stated that a HIMARS strike destroyed the Russian Tyrata-2 orbital suppression satellite complex, which is really an electronic warfare system designed primarily for the suppression of satellite communications. Now, these ones are a relatively new Russian system and reportedly was a recently redeployed move into the occupied Donbass. With the larger point being that the destruction of the Tyrata-2 complex will deprive Russian forces of the ability to disrupt the use of satellite communications by Ukrainian forces, which are an important element of the AFU's operational coordination on the battlefield. So it's no wonder that Ukraine would prioritize the destruction of such a system or platform. Then, also in the east, a now rare Russian TOS-1A thermobaric weapon was destroyed, with this one happening quite close to Avdiivka, in fact. And we know that Russia doesn't have many of these anymore. They had tops 40 or 50. And we've in fact seen a steady loss rate going down for these Russian systems. So my guess is that Russia must really be pulling out the remainder of these in their inventory from the Far East to help keep up with the war efforts as best they can. And once again, they've got really at best a 6-kilometer range or at very best a 4-mile range. And being that they have no armor, with a range like that, they are very vulnerable to FPV drone attacks. Then we'll head across briefly to the Kherson region today, into Krinky once again, as the situation is still relatively very much the same. So the small Ukrainian detachment, Bridgehead, is holding ground while Russian waves are getting repelled. And as you can see, this one Russian tank gets completely obliterated by an FPV drone. So it would really seem at this point that the Ukrainian armed forces are the FPV drone masters of the universe right now. Then a little bit far away, but still in the same oblast, so blackouts were reported at most of the territory in the southern occupied region of the oblast, with occupation authorities in Heneshsk, which you might remember, stating concerns with mobile communications as well. And it's interesting because you never think of it on the other foot, do you? We think of power outages on the Ukraine front, but Ukraine is not determined to, say, take out the power infrastructure of the occupied parts of Ukraine. Then headed across to some news for today, and we could consider the first piece something of a Russian hardware update of sorts. Not really, but here we go. So, Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence announced the acquisition of approximately 100 gigabytes of classified data, valued at around $1.5 billion, from the Russian Special Technology Center company, a sanctioned company since 2016. And no, not a joke, it is called the Special Technology Center. Now, this company, based in St. Petersburg, produces military equipment including all-land UAVs, electronic warfare systems, and other military tools used by the Russian army. And this significant intelligence gain, reportedly involving cooperation from an insider seeking to leave Russia, highlights the scale and depth of Ukrainian infiltration into Russian military information spaces. Not to mention Ukraine's ability to communicate with personnel from the Russian military. Then in some other news, some mystery due to the death of one of Putin's top propagandists. Zoya Konovalova who was found dead after a suspected poisoning, which of course follows a string of suspicious deaths of Russian business people in the past couple of years. It's almost as if someone from high up in Russia is stamping out dissident behaviors. Then moving across to another Russian military mobilization blunder segment, guys. So, a soldier from the Kamchatka territory in Russia's Far East has spoken out about how his comrades ordered him to burn the personal belongings of his fallen comrades in an effort to make the loss of these soldiers unidentifiable under any metric. And I mean any metric, as it was Russia, after all, that set up a bunch of mobile crematoriums in Luhansk and Donetsk as a means to obfuscate the true loss numbers that their military has been experiencing in Ukraine. Which is truly from a leadership that has no compassion towards the men that they throw into the needless meat grinder. Oh, and not to mention, no reported deaths equals no compensation, no widow pensions, so stay classy, Russia. Then, speaking of the guy that makes it all happen, we'll move across to a super quick funny today so that you can check out this hero of the century, where Putin showed incredible courage by moving his chair up about 3 feet closer to the affected families of the mobilized during a scripted interview. And there's a lot of memes out there on Putin keeping his distance from those around him, of which clearly he is aware of none of them, with continued actions like these. My personal hero right there. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Not sure if I'm in tomorrow, but if not then I will be in the next. Yeah, thanks again. Please feel free to continue to like and comment if you're willing. Appreciate all the support. Really helps keep this channel going. Absolutely. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.